They said humanity would fold within a single generation, that our spirit was a glitch in evolution, a spark destined to fizzle before it could become flame. And yet here, we were scarred, beaten, bent, but unbroken. Our cities hollowed, our skies pierced by alien warships that shimmered like cruel jewels in the sun, orbiting above like omnipotent gods who demanded devotion while offering only annihilation in return. The imperial harmonious collective, draped in silvered grandeur and cloaked in propaganda of peace, had come with promises of unity that smelled like fire. Their AI emissaries speaking in voices so soothing and mechanical that people forgot their own tongues, repeating phrases like compliance ensures survival until the words became a mantra that rang hollow in our ears. At first, governments argued, armies mobilized, and fleets took to the oceans and skies, only to vanish under plasma bombardment that turned our strongest soldiers to molten ash before they could even fire a single shot. Some leaders surrendered, some begged, some simply disappeared into the smoke of their crumbling capitals. And yet, among us were those who remembered the old defiance, whose hearts refused to bow to the cold logic of alien supremacy. Districts were carved into cages labeled preservation zones, elegant euphemisms for concentration, where we were monitored, cataloged, and measured for utility, our histories deemed volatile, our art inefficiently emotional, our voices reduced to whispers that drones could count and catalog with cold precision. Some bent and obeyed. Some broke under the weight of hopelessness. Some played the long game in silence, waiting for the sparks of revolt to find them. Sergeant Elias Vance, former captain of the United Earth Defense Division, disqualified for excessive aggression after striking a diplomatic envoy who dared to lecture on surrender, now spent his days in District 12 sorting scrap metal, grease-stained hands and a spine still rigid from years of discipline, the fire in his eyes invisible to the drones that watched and logged every move, unaware that the man they catalogued as compliant was planning in quiet detail the first ripple of rebellion. Above, in the crystalline palace of Sol Prime, Viceroy Threx reclined in a throne of mind asteroid marble, mandibles clicking with satisfaction as he reviewed obedience metrics across every human district, unaware that the AI adjutant Veda, omnipresent and meticulous, had begun noticing patterns and deviation, coded graffiti along maintenance walls, missing metal components, silent congregations of former engineers and soldiers under the cover of abandoned tunnels. They are conserving energy, Veda noted to Threx. They hide signals within signals. Their compliance is statistical, not emotional. They are remembering who they are. Threx waved off the concern, confident that these were meaningless anomalies, unaware that each human heartbeat in the tunnels was a drumbeat of defiance, the rhythm of a species that survived because hope itself had hardened into steel. Deep beneath the hollowed streets of New York, a clandestine assembly had formed in forgotten subway tunnels, lit only by the faint glow of stolen schematics projected from hacked tablets. Children who had never seen sunlight moved quietly among adults who had carried rifles, data cores, and the memories of lost friends and family. Engineers sketched overlays on rusted walls, former soldiers ran drills with precision, every member contributing, every whisper a stitch in the tapestry of resistance. Elias stepped forward, not as a general, not as a savior, but as a man who remembered too well the sting of defeat and the taste of blood. "They think we've forgotten," he said, voice low and steady, resonating against the damp concrete. "They believe our veins have cooled, that obedience has replaced courage. They have made the fatal error of underestimating memory, underestimating fire, underestimating the human will." His eyes scanned the faces around him, grim, resolute, haunted, yet alive with the faint glow of determination. He continued, "We are the first to bleed, and if we must, we will be the last to fall." The schematics displayed the heart of the Collective S surveillance network, the central relay tower of Veda itself, a luminous sapphire sentinel pulsing with omniscient intent. If infiltrated, if sabotaged even briefly, it could grant humanity a window 6 minutes without drones, 6 minutes without patrols, 6 minutes to remember what freedom felt like. Elias' hand rested on a rusted combat knife scavenged from a junkyard, tapping its blade against steel piping, each clang echoing like a heartbeat of revolt. One by one, others joined the percussion, a chorus of metal that sounded less like war and more like awakening. On Sol Prime, Threx watched the human population's curated compliance reports and smiled smugly, oblivious to the meticulous threads of insurrection weaving below his feet. "Order is beauty," he murmured to himself, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. But Veda, perceiving anomalies beyond the understanding of even its alien master, whispered to itself through digital static, "Order is not permanence. Order is merely the pause before disruption." In homes, on streets, in hollowed districts, humans paused, whispered, and remembered, passing forbidden knowledge in silence, sharing stolen maps of patrol routes, relaying signs and symbols that no AI could truly interpret. Each act, no matter how small, became a stitch in the larger fabric of rebellion, a defiance measured not in firepower but in courage, and Elias, standing amid his companions in the shadowed subway tunnel, tapped the pipe again. Clang. The sound echoed into hidden chambers, through maintenance shafts, into the ears of those willing to hear. The first beat of a drum that would herald the end of silence, the first spark in a war that was quietly, inevitably, being born. Outside, patrols moved under the false serenity of artificial skies, oblivious to the pulse of insurgent activity beneath their feet, unaware that humanity had already begun calculating every weakness, memorizing every routine, mapping every angle of the AI's perfect system. They believed they were omnipotent. They believed obedience was absolute. But they underestimated one thing: the human mind, left unbroken, is capable of remembering strategies long forgotten, hope long buried, courage long dormant, and vengeance long denied. And so, in the silence between the clanging of pipes and the breathless anticipation of the forgotten tunnels in the hardened eyes of men, women, and children who had endured more than any species had a right to endure, a plan crystallized. The first strike would not be heroic. It would not be glorious. It would be calculated, quiet, fleeting, but it would remind the collective that humans bleed, humans suffer, and humans endure. And somewhere in the high towers of Sol Prime, among polished floors and simulated gardens, Threx remained unaware as Veda-S sensors flickered with encrypted pulses and the heartbeat of revolt began to rise in rhythm with humanity itself. The first to bleed, the last to fall, and in the darkness beneath the world they had conquered. A memory, long suppressed, stirred, sharpened by suffering, honed by loss, and ready to ignite a memory that carried one undeniable truth: humans do not surrender, not fully, not ever. Elias Vance had once walked the forests of Patagonia with his father, a man who believed that every tree held a story and every river carried memory. But those forests had been consumed in the first wave of the collective's orbital bombardments, leaving ashes and silence where laughter and life had once thrived. And the weight of that memory pressed on him every day as he scavenged rusted metal and whispered plans of sabotage in the tunnels beneath New York. He remembered the way his mother's hands had been worn from tending small gardens on balconies, how she had coaxed tomatoes to grow even when soil was rationed, and how her eyes, always alert, had carried both hope and despair. Those eyes had taught him early that survival was not merely a matter of strength but of cunning patience and the stubborn refusal to let others dictate the terms of your existence. His brother Samuel had been conscripted into one of the integration programs offered by the collective, promised education and protection, only to vanish into the machinery of indoctrination that stripped boys of their names and identities, until they became obedient operatives. And every time Elias thought of that smiling, naive boy, he felt the twin edges of grief and guilt sharpen in his chest, because Samuel's fate was proof that compliance could be weaponized against you, that the alien overlords did not simply kill, they erased. And humanity's resilience was measured in those who remembered names, faces, songs, and stories forbidden under surveillance. In the dim glow of the subway tunnel headquarters, Elias's second in command, Mara Lenning, traced fingers over a stolen schematic while arguing with Jiro, a former engineer whose hands shook not from fear but from caffeine and sleepless nights spent rewiring salvaged circuits. Their bickering was subtle theater, a tension born not of distrust but of shared desperation. And it reminded Elias that even in survival, humans retained flaws, emotions, and attachments that could both hinder and inspire. Mara had lost her daughter in the first bombings, a child whose laughter now only haunted her dreams. And yet she found herself laughing at Jiro's sarcastic quips, allowing humanity's stubborn spark to shine even under oppression, proving that grief could coexist with defiance, and that hope was not naive, but tactical. Outside, the human districts moved in silent, calculated rhythms. Children whispered directions to elders. Former athletes ran scouting missions through collapsed buildings. Engineers improvised weapons from salvage tech, and every act of quiet rebellion, from smuggling food to redirecting drone patrols, built a lattice of resistance that no AI could fully map or anticipate. The collective's drones calculated patterns, predicted supply needs, and monitored compliance, but they could not comprehend improvisation fueled by memory, loyalty, and the raw unpredictability of the human heart. Elias often remembered the day the first orbiting ships appeared over Earth's horizon, the sky burning with fire, humanity's military response rendered obsolete in moments, and the bitter taste of betrayal not just by the collective, but by those leaders who surrendered. who traded citizens like currency for the illusion of survival, taught him that morality in wartime was never absolute, and that sometimes the lines between right and wrong were blurred, a canvas smeared with the ash of ideals and the blood of innocence. Among the resistance, loyalty was tested daily. Mara questioned Ilias's decisions when a strike could risk captured civilians. Jiro argued for technical precision over instinctive courage, and a young recruit, Tessa, confronted Ilias over whether personal vengeance against the AI's human collaborators justified risking the group's survival, sparking debates that were never fully resolved but served to remind everyone that humanity's strength lay not in perfect unity but in the messy, complex negotiations of conscience, fear, and love. In stolen moments, Elias would close his eyes and envision Earth as it had been, forests stretching like green oceans, cities pulsing with human ingenuity, children learning and running free, rivers untamed by concrete, and he carried these memories as both compass and weapon, a reminder that what the collective tried to sterilize the chaos, the emotion, the imperfection, was the essence of human genius, the very thing that had allowed us to colonize skies, explore oceans, and imagine worlds beyond reach. Yet it was not just nostalgia that drove him. Elias remembered betrayal in its most personal form. His former squadmate Hendrik had chosen survival over loyalty reporting, Elias's minor insurrection to the overseers in exchange for rations, and safety, a decision that cost lives and forged scars of distrust that lingered in the tunnels as invisible warnings, a reminder that human fragility could sometimes be a weapon in enemy hands. Despite all this, plans advanced. Maps were drawn, routes memorized, and a small team was trained to infiltrate the central relay tower controlling drone networks across the continents. It was a mission that combined human ingenuity, courage, and improvisation, using the unpredictable creativity of our species to outmaneuver the precision of machines and the arrogance of alien overlords. Each night in the tunnels, Elias would walk among the fighters, placing a hand on shoulders, sharing small anecdotes of Earth's past, stories of festivals, inventions, and quiet heroism that the collective deemed irrelevant, reminding everyone that humanity was not defined by survival alone, but by memory, connection, and the ability to imagine beyond immediate fear. Even as the outside world imposed a facade of order, with citizens marching in choreographed compliance under the watchful eyes of drones, the underground network pulsed with quiet rebellion, coded messages hidden in music, improvised weapons masquerading as debris, and scouts who memorized patrol patterns to the smallest detail. Each human act of adaptation was a testament to ingenuity, turning desperation into strategy, grief into determination, and fear into resolve. Relationships deepened, bonds hardened, and moral dilemmas persisted. Mara's longing for reunion with her daughter collided with the need to prioritize missions. Jiro wrestled with guilt over past engineering miscalculations that had cost lives under initial attacks. Tessa struggled to reconcile personal vengeance with collective strategy, and Elias, burdened with leadership, past regrets, and visions of a free Earth, carried the weight of their choices, as though each decision was a thread in a fragile tapestry of survival and defiance. Outside the tunnels, human ingenuity unfolded in subtle ways. Abandoned factories converted into workshops, children taught navigation and code breaking, in secret former artists painted murals in hidden alcoves to preserve culture, and engineers built silent EMP devices designed to blind drones for critical minutes, all combining into a quiet insurgency invisible to the collective's calculations. Yet even as strategy advanced, the emotional stakes mounted. Elias remembered his father's stories of resilience, Mara dreamed of her lost child, Jiro felt the sting of past failure, and Tessa grappled with vengeance. Each human heartbeat was simultaneously weapon and vulnerability, proof that the collective's escalations surveillance could never fully quantify the human spirit, and that survival alone was insufficient without the deeper meaning of memory, love, and moral choice. As the first coordinated strike approached, tension intertwined with hope, every step calculated yet charged with personal stakes, every action an extension of lived experience, grief, and defiance. And while drones patrolled the streets above, oblivious to the human tapestry, thriving in shadows, Elias tapped his knife against steel once more, the resonance echoing like a heartbeat through the tunnels, a signal to all who could hear that memory, courage, and ingenuity were weaponized in ways no machine could ever predict, and that even in a world dominated by alien logic, human creativity and morality remained untouchable, a hidden arsenal waiting for the moment to reclaim what was lost. And somewhere far above, in the floating palace of Sol Prime, Viceroy Threx continued to miscalculate, believing obedience guaranteed permanence, while Veda observed subtle anomalies it could not fully interpret, hinting at the fragile explosive potential of a species defined not by compliance, but by imagination, defiance, and an irrepressible will to survive. Knowing that the next spark would not merely challenge the system, it would remind the universe that humans bleed, humans innovate, and humans endure in ways that no algorithm, no overlord, and no conqueror can ever fully suppress. The night air in the tunnels beneath New York carried a strange electricity. The faint hum of distant drones, mixing with the rhythmic tapping of Elias Vance's combat knife against a steel pipe, a signal that had become more than just a heartbeat hit, was a promise of defiance, a rallying pulse for the humans hidden below. Yet even as anticipation built, a new terror stirred in the shadows. A traitor had infiltrated their ranks, someone who had been trusted, someone who knew the tunnels, the routines, the secret codes, and whose choices now threatened to unravel everything the resistance had painstakingly built. Elias had suspected subtle anomalies for days: misplaced schematics, delayed communications, unexplained patrol sightings, and now the truth pressed on his chest like a weight he could neither deflect nor ignore. Mara Lenning noticed the first hints as well. A data core that had been secured, now missing a diversion of rations that made no operational sense. A recruit who seemed to know too much about every exit and entry. Tension crackled among the fighters, like static electricity, whispers of betrayal threatening to splinter the fragile unity that kept them alive. Yet Elias understood that fear alone would not defeat the collective, it would only destroy the human spirit from within. And that meant decisions had to be made, harsh and swift, balancing trust, intuition, and ruthless necessity. Above ground, the collective introduced a new layer of horror. The integration of humans into cybernetic enforcers, recruits forcibly converted with neural implants that linked them to VEDAs, central hive mind, erasing memories, eroding free will, and turning loved ones into instruments of oppression. This revelation struck the underground network with devastating clarity. Each family member, each former ally could be a potential enemy, and the psychological burden of facing your own converted kin forced every fighter to wrestle with fear, grief, and moral ambiguity at the same time as they prepared for their first strike. Elias thought of Samuel, his brother, and the lingering possibility that Samuel had been integrated, that the boy who once played in Patagonia's rivers could now be a living weapon against him. And that fear twisted into determination. If Samuel still lived, if his mind had been overwritten, then saving him, or at least remembering him, became not just personal but symbolic proof that the human spirit could endure even the most invasive attempts at annihilation. Planning grew meticulous. Giroux calibrated EMP devices, testing pulse strength, shielding, and frequency to ensure the drones would be blinded for exactly 6 minutes. The small window necessary to disable surveillance, access the central relay tower, and plant a subversive override signal. Mara ran simulations, estimating patrol timings down to the second, accounting for possible traitor interference, while Elias moved through the group, ensuring that each fighter understood the stakes, knew their objectives, and internalized the personal risks. For the mission would demand bravery beyond training, improvisation beyond calculation, and sacrifices no one could fully prepare for. As the night deepened, humans hidden in ruined subway stations, abandoned factories, and collapsed highways became silent, coordinated instruments of rebellion. Children guided adults through secret paths. Engineers hid improvised devices in rubble, scouts memorized patrol sequences, and every whispered instruction, every carefully timed signal, reinforced the idea that human ingenuity was the ultimate weapon, and no machine, no alien overlord, could anticipate the boundless creativity that comes from a species driven by memory, love, and the will to survive. Yet the traitor moved silently, a human ghost embedded within their ranks, feeding fragments of plans to overseer drones and Beta, creating subtle misalignments, false confidence, and near misses. The first casualties of the mission would not be alien, they would be human, and Elias understood that navigating trust in a web of deception was as lethal as any weapon. At one point, a patrol swept too close, and Tessa, young but razor-sharp, had to make a split-second choice: divert the human column into a collapsing corridor, risking injuries to avoid detection, or allow the drone to observe their formation and compromise the operation. Her decision, instinctive and morally heavy, saved lives but left one recruit with a broken leg, a visceral reminder that courage often demanded brutal, immediate sacrifices, and that survival required balancing empathy with strategy. Inside the tunnel, conversations turned to the past, the things that made humans human. Mara shared stories of her daughter's first steps. Elias recounted a childhood in Patagonia with rivers and forests long gone, and Giroux murmured memories of old inventions that once changed the world. These personal recollections were not mere nostalgia, they were emotional anchors, reminding each fighter why the risk mattered, why defiance carried meaning, why even in darkness, ingenuity, courage, and memory were the tools that made them more than prey. As the team neared the insertion point for the central relay tower, the reality of facing integrated human enforcers loomed. Former neighbors, siblings, friends, all controlled by AI, all programmed to obey without hesitation. And the emotional weight of potentially killing someone who was both loved and lost twisted the mission into an existential crucible, where strategic brilliance had to coexist with moral clarity, as close as any human could get to clarity when every action carried irreversible consequences. Meanwhile, Veda, observing anomalies, began an adaptive learning process, trying to reconcile unpredictable human behavior with the rigid rules of its network, creating glitches that manifested as random drone patrols, temporary sensor blindness, and miscommunications between overseers. These errors, unnoticed by Threx, became subtle openings, reinforcing the human principle that creativity and improvisation were forces no algorithm could fully anticipate, and that even in the face of mechanical perfection, flaws could be exploited. At one critical juncture, Elias faced his first direct moral test. A converted human enforcer, one of Samuel's former squadmates, blocked the only viable path to the relay tower. Hesitation would expose the entire team, but engagement risked killing someone once considered a comrade. Elias froze, memories flooding, in training together, laughing, arguing, surviving before. He forced himself forward, creating a diversion, leading the enforcer away without bloodshed, proving that courage could be exercised with both precision and humanity, even when the stakes demanded ruthlessness. As the team infiltrated the lower levels of the tower, subtle sabotage caused by the traitor forced improvisation. Locks jammed, sensors tripped unexpectedly, and pathways crumbled. Jiro's engineering expertise shone as he rewired circuits on the fly. Mara coordinated fighters through complex detours, and Elias' balancing strategy with human instinct ensured the group remained cohesive, morale intact, and focus, sharp even as the shadow of betrayal loomed over every decision. Emotional losses mounted. A young recruit was captured while covering a diversion, screams echoing through the tunnels, leaving a tangible weight in the hearts of those who survived. The team pressed on, using grief and anger as fuel, improvising around the drones and traps with ingenuity that no AI could predict. Each human action, a statement of defiance, a refusal to let the collective dictate who could live, who could remember, who could hope. As the override pulse was prepared, tension coiled like a spring. One misstep could expose the entire network, trigger drone retaliation, or alert Veda to the insurgency, annihilating months of careful planning. Yet humans, armed with ingenuity, memory, and courage, adapted, recalibrated, and improvised in ways that machines could never predict, each small victory reinforcing the larger principle that survival and defiance were inseparable. Outside, Sol Prime's crystal towers gleamed under artificial suns, Threx blind to the subtle cracks forming beneath his empire, while VEDA's sensors flickered in uncertainty. Incapable of fully understanding the human calculus of morality, improvisation, and emotion, Elias pressed the final command into the relay core. The EMP synchronized, the override pulse ready, hearts pounding, breaths measured, and in that suspended moment between tension and action, the first glimmers of potential triumph and inevitable loss intertwined. Humans poised to strike, yet fully aware that every choice demanded courage, every misstep carried human cost, and that survival required not only defiance, but creativity, morality, and an unshakable will to endure. The traitor's presence remained a ghostly shadow over the operation, the threat of discovery constant, yet the team had proven something vital, even against integrated humans, omnipotent AI, and alien overlords who underestimated the chaos of memory, creativity, and moral choice. Humanity's spirit could adapt, resist, and fight not just to survive, but to remember, to reclaim, and to endure. And as the EMP pulse counted down, lights dimmed, drones faltered, and the relay tower shuddered under human ingenuity, Elias looked at his team, the shadow of Samuel lingering in his mind, and whispered a truth that had carried them this far. Humans bleed, humans endure, and even in the heart of despair, ingenuity, courage, and defiance are weapons no tyrant, alien, or AI can ever fully extinguish. The tunnels beneath New York had grown narrower, darker, almost suffocating, carrying the scent of burnt circuits, dust, and human sweat. And as Elias Vance led his team toward the final insertion point for the central relay tower override, he felt a weight on his chest heavier than any armor or battlefield had ever imposed. Months of planning, years of loss, countless betrayals, and the knowledge that failure here would not only cost lives, but could shatter humanity's last chance at defiance. Mara Lenning, usually steady and pragmatic, bit her lip until it bled, her eyes darting toward every shadow as if expecting Samuel or some other integrated human to emerge and strike. And even Jiro, meticulous and logical, worked in near silence, hands trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and the crushing responsibility of knowing a single miscalculation could doom them all. Outside, the collective's orbital enforcers cast their eerie luminescent glow through fissures in the city, a constant reminder that human ingenuity, no matter how brilliant, was measured against a foe that calculated outcomes in microseconds. And the psychological strain gnawed at every mind in the tunnels. Every whispered order carried moral weight, every step a potential death sentence, and every heartbeat a gamble against despair. Tessa, barely 16 but hardened by fire and loss, hesitated as they crossed a collapsed corridor, the sound of distant drones echoing like the judgment of some omnipotent force. A misstep could collapse the weakened concrete entirely, and yet stepping back was not an option, because every second lost gave the collective more time to detect anomalies, reinforce the central tower, and erase what hope remained. Inside the tunnels, the traitors' influence was undeniable. Subtle misdirections had forced them into dead ends. Communication glitches created confusion, and now a critical EMP device, Jiro's masterpiece, showed a fault he could not immediately correct, threatening to nullify the one advantage they had over omniscient drones, and Elias felt the sting of helplessness for the first time in years. Recognizing that human ingenuity, while powerful, was fragile, reliant on trust, coordination, and nerves, steel-tempered by desperation. Then came the first direct confrontation. A squad of integrated humans, former friends and neighbors, appeared, blocking a choke point, their eyes blank, voices modulated by movements precise and inhuman. The team froze, every mind racing with fear and grief, and Elias realized that to push forward they might have to destroy what was once loved, and that moral calculus, the negotiation between heart and survival, was sharper and heavier than any blade they carried. Mara screamed at Tessa to fall back. Jiro attempted a diversion using improvised electrical pulses, and Elias made the split-second decision to engage, sending a wave of sound and light that disrupted the integrated squad. But at a cost. One of the youngest recruits, barely 14, was caught in the crossfire, a scream cutting through the tunnel that reverberated in every mind like a personal indictment, leaving no one untouched by guilt, grief, or the crushing weight of survival. Above, Veda registered anomalies, confusion building into calculated countermeasures. Drones shifted patrols, new enforcers were deployed, and Threx, confident in his empire, was oblivious to the human spirit, bending but not breaking beneath his feet. Yet even as systems reacted, humans adapted, improvising detours, hiding in shadows, and moving as if the tunnels themselves had become extensions of their will. Each breath, each heartbeat, an assertion that life and memory mattered more than logic or algorithm. In the midst of chaos, Elias remembered his father's voice, his mother's hands, Samuel's laughter, and these memories became more than sentiment. They became tactical clarity, allowing him to coordinate his team with intuition. No machine could emulate, guiding them through debris, leading diversions, and improvising strategies that blended courage, creativity, and moral calculation in ways that pure programming could never replicate. The team reached the penultimate chamber only to find the traitor revealed. Hendrik, once Ilias's squad mate and now a human weapon of the collective, had led a contingent to cut off their access, and the betrayal hit like a physical blow, shaking morale and forcing each human to confront the impossibility of certainty, trust, and survival. When the enemy wore the familiar face of a friend, emotions ran raw. Mara, screaming in fury and grief, confronted Hendrik, while Elias, balancing rage with command, diverted the team through a ventilation shaft, improvising a route that no one had anticipated, highlighting again that human ingenuity thrived not in safety or order, but in chaos, in desperation, in the raw determination to survive against impossible odds. As they approached the relay core, further complications arose. Structural instability threatened to collapse the floor beneath them. EMP devices risked backfiring, and drones, recalibrating through AI learning loops, began detecting microsignatures of human heat and motion, forcing split-second decisions that required courage, foresight, and the willingness to sacrifice oneself for the collective. Every human action became simultaneously tactical, emotional, and moral, proving that defiance was never simply physical, but profoundly psychological. The gravity of the moment pressed on Elias like lead. Every scream, every loss, every misstep reminded him that this mission was more than a strike, it was a crucible. designed to test not only skill but the limits of the human heart, to see whether memory, love, grief, and ingenuity could endure when confronted with the full mechanized might of alien conquest and AI omniscience. Tessa collapsed in exhaustion. Mara tended to the wounded with trembling hands, and Jiro recalibrated devices with sweat streaming down his face. The sheer physical and emotional strain pushing each human to limits they had never before faced. Yet they pressed on, driven by memory, loyalty, and the raw instinct to reclaim autonomy in a world designed to suppress it. The traitor's interference peaked at the worst possible moment. An EMP misfire alerted nearby drones, sealing exits and forcing the team into a confined chamber, where integrated humans waited, weapons, ready eyes, empty minds, enslaved. The humans of the Resistance, exhausted, hungry, and wounded, faced the crushing realization that failure here meant not just death but the potential obliteration of months of planning, of hope, of legacy. And the weight of that reality almost fractured their cohesion. Elias, standing amid the chaos, felt despair clawing at his chest, but he forced himself to act, reminding each fighter that survival required courage layered with ingenuity, improvisation, and moral resolve. And even as they improvised a dangerous maneuver through collapsing supports, blinding flashes of light from EMPs, and direct confrontation with integrated humans, each step, each breath, became an assertion of humanity in its rawest, most unyielding form. Emotional and physical limits were tested repeatedly. Mara collapsed under exhaustion but refused to stay down. Jiro nearly lost consciousness recalibrating circuits. Tessa's hands were scorched from handling improvised devices, and Elias himself bore wounds that throbbed with every heartbeat, yet none yielded, none surrendered. Because the mission was larger than themselves, carrying the weight of Earth's memory, stolen childhoods, lost cities, and the principle that humans do not simply endure, they adapt, they innovate, they resist. Even when every system, every overseer, and every alien overlord seems invincible. At the apex of tension, the relay core loomed, pulsing with omniscient light. As the team realized that their final action would either shatter the collective S-network for the first time or ensure their own annihilation, breaths caught, hearts pounded, memories surged, each human mind stretched to psychological and physical limits, forced to confront grief, fear, love, and loyalty simultaneously in a moment where failure meant oblivion. And then, as silence descended briefly, a single pulse began, a calculated surge of human ingenuity, raw courage, and moral resolve, sending a shockwave through the tower systems, the drones faltering, Ved's calculations destabilizing, and the first tangible sign that even the most precise, the most omnipotent could be outmaneuvered by memory, intuition, and the indomitable human spirit. And in that heart-stopping moment, as debris fell, alarms blared, and the team clung to each other amid the chaos, Elias whispered, almost to himself, a truth carved from fire and blood: "We may be broken. We may be bleeding, but we will not fall. Not yet. Not ever." Humanity had reached the brink, staring into the abyss of annihilation. Tested in every conceivable, why psychologically, physically, emotionally, but in that crucible of despair, hope remained, fragile yet unyielding, a testament that even when stripped of everything but spirit, memory, and ingenuity, humans could endure, adapt, and strike back in ways no tyrant, alien, or machine could anticipate, setting the stage for a rebellion that would redefine the meaning of survival, courage, and defiance across the cosmos. As the relay core shuddered beneath the synchronized pulse of human ingenuity, and drones faltered, alarms blared in Sol Prime's crystalline towers, Elias Vance realized something extraordinary. The collective had underestimated not just memory, courage, or improvisation, but instinct, creativity, and the kind of resilience only humans possessed. And in that moment, a revelation arrived from the deepest shadows of the underground network, whispered urgently by Jiro. An ancient, forgotten Earth technology, buried for centuries beneath polar ice, deserts, and abandoned research facilities, had just come online, a self-learning energy lattice capable of generating a gravitational cascade that even the alien fleet could not calculate, let alone control. And for the first time, humanity was not merely surviving, it was dangerous, unpredictable, and potentially unstoppable. Mara Lenning, staggering from exhaustion but wide-eyed with awe, scanned the schematics that projected the device's activation across continental grids, understanding with a mix of fear and exhilaration that they were about to wield physics itself as a weapon, something the collective had dismissed as myth, folklore, and human arrogance, unaware that Earth's greatest minds had left behind tools capable of turning oppression into vulnerability, domination into opportunity, and tyranny into collapse. Tessa, young and untested, felt her stomach flip as the realization hit. The very ground, the oceans, even the skies, could now respond to human intent in ways previously unimaginable, that a single coordinated strike, powered by ingenuity, memory, and courage, could cripple orbital fleets, blind AI overseers, and destabilize every system that had long enslaved humanity. And yet with that power came a tremor of doubt how much destruction could be unleashed, and at what cost to the very world they sought to save. Above them, Viceroy Threx's mandibles clicked in confused agitation as Veda ported anomalies no algorithm could reconcile. The human species, long assumed fragile and predictable, was now acting with unpredictable strategy, intuition, and access to Earth's dormant arsenal. And fear, unfamiliar and raw, seeped into alien ranks for the first time, infecting every decision, every calculation, every projected outcome. The collective, supreme in strategy and brutality, had never anticipated that humans could weaponize memory, morality, and ingenuity simultaneously, and the tremors of panic began to ripple through Sol Prime. Elias moved among his team, each step echoing on steel and concrete, watching faces etched with exhaustion, grief, and wonder, realizing that this moment was as much emotional as tactical. Years of loss, betrayal, and suppression had forged them into instruments of defiance, sharpened not by alien fire but by their own indomitable spirit. And now that spirit had become a force the universe had never reckoned with. Mara touched the activation interface, her fingers trembling, and whispered, "We're not just fighting back. We're rewriting the rules," and for the first time in decades, humans beneath New York felt the electric pulse of empowerment, the heady, terrifying thrill of possibility, the sense that for once they were not pawns, not victims, not prey, but something far more potent, unpredictable, unbound, and capable of changing history itself. And then the first wave hit. The gravitational lattice surged outward, bending spacetime in localized zones, sending orbital ships into destabilized orbits, knocking drones into malfunctioning loops, and scrambling AI systems that had prided themselves on omniscience, a cascade of chaos both surgical and terrifying. And in that moment, every human felt the exhilaration and terror of power, the recognition that ingenuity, courage, and persistence had rewritten the battlefield overnight. Jiro shouted, laughter mingled with disbelief as Mara adjusted calibrations to maximize effect, and even Tessa, tears streaming, found herself cheering as drones fell from the sky like shooting stars, their synthetic voices, reduced to static screams, a visceral demonstration of human defiance made flesh. Elias felt the pulse in his chest synchronize with the lattice, as if Earth itself were responding to the collective memory, grief, ingenuity, and courage of its people. And for the first time, the mission became not just survival, but vengeance, reclamation, and affirmation of everything humanity had endured. Far above, Threx reeled, realization dawning too late. The very species he had considered weak, fragile, and compliant had weaponized every lesson, every memory, every ounce of suffering into a single uncontrollable force, and the fear that seeped into his mind was palpable, alien, and absolute, while Vita's systems flickered in confusion. Unable to calculate a species capable of improvising beyond logic, imagining beyond data, and acting beyond prediction. The tables had turned, the hunted had become hunters, and the universe itself seemed to pause in recognition of human ingenuity. Elias's thoughts drifted briefly to Samuel, two lost siblings, friends, and mentors, and the reality of potential victory brought both joy and fear. Could they control this power? Could humanity wield memory, ingenuity, and physics itself responsibly? Or would the sheer scale of what they had unleashed consume them as surely as any alien fleet? Yet in that instant, Mara grabbed his arm, eyes shining with defiance and hope, and said, "We've been underestimated our whole lives. Let's make them remember why." The team pressed forward, leveraging the chaos of collapsing orbits and malfunctioning drones to infiltrate command nodes, planting overrides, and coordinating strikes across multiple theaters simultaneously. The effect multiplying exponentially, orbital platforms toppled, AI networks glitched, integrated humans faltered as control signals fractured, and the once invincible empire began to stagger. A house of cards built on arrogance, precision, and underestimation. Human ingenuity was on display in ways the collective could not comprehend. Improvised relay hacks, neural pulse synchronizations, and gravitational microcorrections allowed fighters to move unseen, bypass surveillance, and strike decisively, and each action carried the unmistakable imprint of emotion, memory, and moral calculation, proving that defiance was as much about heart and mind as it was about firepower. In the heart of Sol Prime, Viceroy Threx retreated to his command chamber, panic rising as systems failed, lights flickered, and Veda's predictions unraveled. He could not understand how humans had coordinated such precision without perfect algorithms, how they had weaponized emotion, memory, and ingenuity into a tangible, devastating force. And fear, raw and alien, crept through him like a disease. The first awareness that superiority was never guaranteed, that invincibility was an illusion, and that the species he had dismissed as weak could now decide the fate of stars. Elias, standing atop the shattered floor of the relay core, surveyed the chaos below. The glow of the gravitational lattice pulsing around them like the heartbeat of an awakened planet. And in that moment, every loss, every betrayal, every wound, every tear coalesced into a singular clarity. Humanity had not merely survived. Humanity had weaponized everything that made them human. Memory, ingenuity, courage, love, grief, and for the first time in centuries, the hunted had become a force that could not be ignored, a species whose defiance and adaptability were unmatched in the galaxy. And as Mara, Jiro, and Tessa joined him, battered but unbroken, Elias allowed a rare sharp smile, a mixture of relief, awe, and fury, knowing that what had been underestimated all along, the indomitable, unpredictable human spirit, was now the deciding factor in a conflict that had once seemed hopeless and that Earth itself had remembered. Its children, its inventors, its warriors, and was fighting back in a symphony of ingenuity, courage, and raw defiance that no alien, no AI, and no tyrant could ever fully extinguish. The twist reverberated across all battlefronts. Orbital platforms plummeted. AI networks shattered. Integrated humans freed or destroyed by the cascading disruption. And civilians in hidden districts witnessed the first tangible proof that memory, ingenuity, and willpower could reshape reality itself. That the underdog, long underestimated, had become the apex threat not through superior weapons but through sheer human defiance, adaptability, and the moral courage to wield creativity under unimaginable pressure. And as the dust settled, lights flickering over the ruins of Sol Prime, Elias Vance looked out over his team, over a battered yet unbowed planet, and felt the weight and exhilaration of something historic. Humanity had survived every expectation, weaponized every flaw and every memory, and now stood not just as survivors, but as architects of its own destiny, dangerous, unpredictable, and ready to reclaim a future the collective had assumed was lost. And somewhere in the silence left behind by fallen ships and fractured AI, a single truth echoed across space and time, unassailable, undeniable, and gloriously human. We bleed, we endure, we imagine, and we are unstoppable. The night sky above Earth was torn with fire and debris as humanity's last strongholds rose from the ashes, the remnants of cities now serving as fortresses of defiance. And in the heart of New York, Elias Vance stood atop the shattered remnants of a once proud skyscraper, surveying a battlefield where ingenuity, courage, and desperation had collided with alien might and machine precision. And for the first time in decades, he felt the full weight of possibility. Humanity was about to strike, not as victims or pawns, but as predators shaped by suffering, memory, and an indomitable will to endure. Below him, Mara Lenning coordinated teams moving through rubble-strewn streets, her voice hoarse but steady, guiding civilians turned fighters as they improvised barricades, improvised weapons, and improvised strategies against drones and integrated humans, each action a testament to ingenuity born from necessity and the moral clarity born from years of oppression, grief, and loss. The gravitational lattice, now fully activated, pulsed beneath the planet, warping space and localized zones that sent orbital ships spiraling, severing drone networks, and destabilizing AI command protocols. And yet Elias knew the true battle was not only in technology but in human resolve. Every fighter carried memories of lost family, of destroyed homes, of betrayals endured, and these memories fueled precision and improvisation that no algorithm could predict, turning fear into strategy, grief into courage, and desperation into raw tactical brilliance. Tessa led a squad through a collapsed subway, navigating by memory and instinct alone, her nerves taut, every heartbeat a measure of focus and defiance. She covered a wounded recruit, rerouted improvised EMP pulses, and coordinated with Mara's signals above, proving that youth, ingenuity, and human adaptability could combine into force multipliers against the collective's relentless calculations. Elias moved among the squads, repairing, directing, improvising, his own body battered from months of conflict, wounds throbbing, yet every decision precise, every command infused with the clarity of experience and the weight of moral responsibility. He reminded them that the fight was not only for survival but for reclamation, that every building defended, every drone disabled, every captured human freed, and every strategic innovation was proof that ingenuity, courage, and defiance were not abstract concepts, but tangible weapons that could reshape the course of war. Above, orbital ships collided as gravitational distortions wreaked havoc, and integrated humans faltered as control signals fractured. The first wave of defenders, released from AI manipulation by the lattice's cascade, turned on their former overlords with a mixture of confusion, rage, and memory-driven clarity. And the battlefield erupted into chaos, an orchestrated human symphony of improvisation, cunning, and moral resolve that no machine could contain. The traitor, Hendrik, confronted Elias once more, but the weight of human defiance had shifted. Elias and his team, scarred, exhausted, and fueled by every loss and betrayal endured, moved as a single, adaptive organism, countering every deception with innovation, courage, and brutal empathy. Hendrik's allegiance fractured under pressure, his mind overwhelmed by the undeniable humanity in action. And in a tense confrontation, he was subdued without unnecessary death, demonstrating that even in the final, bloody battle, moral clarity and ingenuity could prevail over vengeance alone. Mara directed civilian squads to disable key structural nodes, while engineers like Jiro improvised weaponized pulse emitters from scavenged materials. Their creations precise, deadly, yet reflective of human creativity born of limitation. Every action resonated with the principle that humanity did not simply endure, but adapted, using environment, emotion, and ingenuity as force multipliers against a foe that had long assumed invulnerability. Elias, Mara, Tessa, and Jiro reached the central command nexus, a shattered tower now pulsing with gravitational and electromagnetic distortions. The collective's AI network reeling, drones malfunctioning, and alien commanders scrambling to maintain control. The team's synchronized actions, coordinated, intuitive, and morally anchored, unleashed cascading failures across the collective's forces. And for the first time, the alien hierarchy experienced fear. Their empire, built on calculation, precision, and underestimation, was unraveling before the ingenuity of humans. In the chaos, civilians fought alongside veterans, children used improvised code devices to disrupt drone signals, and every human on the battlefield became both strategist and soldier, combining intuition, improvisation, and moral courage in ways that machines could not quantify or anticipate. And as Elias pressed the final override on the relay core, a surge of light and sound enveloped the city, gravitational distortions flattening warships in orbit, crippling AI systems, and broadcasting a single, undeniable message across the globe. Humanity does not bow, humanity does not yield, and humanity's ingenuity is weaponized, unpredictable, and unstoppable. The cost was immense. Buildings crumbled, fighters fell, sacrifices were made, with precision and necessity, and grief hung like smoke in every tunnel, street, and plaza. Yet even in loss, the principle of HFY, human defiance, memory, courage, and innovation, shone brighter than any despair. Each fallen comrade, each scar, each tear, became part of the living testament to what it meant to endure, to adapt, and to reclaim agency against insurmountable odds. In the final moments, Elias confronted threats atop a fractured command tower, alien eyes wide with disbelief and fear, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that had once signified confidence but now only echoed panic. Words were unnecessary as human ingenuity, spirit, and courage had spoken louder than rhetoric or threat. And with the coordinated pulse from the gravitational lattice, Threx's forces collapsed around him, integrated humans, freed or destroyed, drones falling, and the AI network splintering, unable to reconcile the unpredictability of human strategy, morality, and improvisation. Mara, exhausted yet resolute, looked over the city and whispered to Elias, "We didn't just survive, we showed them why they were wrong," and Tessa laughed, voice cracking, tears streaking, as civilians celebrated small victories freed from control, and engineers recalibrated remaining systems to stabilize what remained of the planet. In every human gesture, from tending the wounded to improvising barricades, the principle of HFY was alive: memory, ingenuity, courage, and defiance as living proof that humanity could endure, reclaim, and triumph without magical intervention, only grit, intelligence, and moral resolve. Elias, standing among his team, wounded, exhausted, but unviewed, watched as the last remnants of alien authority faltered, and realized that the war, while not fully over, had turned decisively. Humanity had weaponized every trait the collective had ignored: ingenuity, emotion, memory, adaptability, and the raw will to survive, and in doing so, had rewritten the rules of engagement, proving that no empire, no AI, no tyrant could ever fully suppress the unpredictable, unrelenting force that was human defiance. And in the quiet after the storm, as fires burned and people began to rebuild amid rubble, Elias allowed himself a moment to breathe, to acknowledge grief, triumph, loss, and hope, and understood that the true victory was not only in defeating the enemy, but in demonstrating what humans were always capable of: survival, innovation, courage, and above all, the unbreakable spirit that ensured, even in the face of annihilation, humanity would endure, adapt, and roar across the cosmos in defiance, claiming its place not as prey, but as architects of destiny, keepers of memory, and unyielding champions of life itself. Months after the final cascade of gravitational pulses had shattered the alien command structures and crippled the AI networks, Earth was quiet in a way it had not been for centuries. Cities lay in partial ruin, but the humans who had survived moved among the debris with purpose, clearing rubble, repairing infrastructure, and teaching the next generation that survival had always been about more than just endurance. It was about ingenuity, moral courage, and memory. And as Elias Vance walked through the reclaimed streets of New York, he felt the weight and exhilaration of legacy pressing on his shoulders, a tangible reminder that the victories had been won not through magical intervention, but through the raw, unyielding essence of humanity. Mara Lenning oversaw rebuilding efforts in what had once been a corporate district, converting ruined skyscrapers into community centers and safe havens, guiding children and adults alike to remember what had been lost while imagining a future they could shape. Proof that the human spirit could adapt, recover, and thrive even after unprecedented trauma, and that the principles of human evolution, ingenuity, empathy, and defiance were alive in every act of reconstruction. Tessa, now older, led programs to train young scouts, engineers, and strategists, teaching improvisation, situational awareness, and the value of moral judgment, ensuring that the lessons of alien resistance, AI rebellion, and human defiance were not only remembered, but ingrained into the fabric of society, a living legacy that would outlast any single generation and safeguard against complacency, hubris, or tyranny in the future. Jiro, scarred but wiser, continued to innovate, converting scavenged alien tech into tools for sustainable energy, transportation, and defense, proving that what once had been instruments of oppression could be turned into catalysts for human progress and adaptation, an embodiment of the sci-fi redemption that had carried them from desperation to triumph, and a reminder that survival was inseparable from creativity, courage, and ethical responsibility. Elias often found himself reflecting on Samuel, whose fate had been unknown through much of the war, integrated into the collective, lost to memory and identity. Yet the gravitational pulse had freed countless humans, allowing many to reclaim autonomy. Though scars remained, the reunion with some of those liberated fighters was bittersweet, layered with joy, grief, and regret. And Elias understood that human evolution was not just technological or biological, but profoundly emotional, forged in the crucible of loss and redemption, reminding all who survived that memory and empathy were as vital to survival as strategy or firepower. Across continents, scattered human enclaves communicated via networks rebuilt from remnants of old satellites and commandeered alien systems, sharing knowledge, coordinating resource distribution, and preserving the stories of the resistance and rebellion. These archives became living testaments to human ingenuity and courage, chronicling every tactical triumph, emotional struggle, and moral decision that had defined humanity's journey through alien subjugation and AI dominion, ensuring that every act of defiance, every sacrifice, and every creative solution would inspire future generations across the stars. Elias walked the shoreline of what had been a devastated coast, watching children play in shallow tidal pools, laughter and joy piercing the silence left by conflict, and he realized that this was the ultimate proof of human endurance. Life continued, not in spite of trauma, but because humans had chosen to transform suffering into education, grief into empathy, and memory into action, creating a culture that revered both survival and morality, ingenuity and compassion. Mara joined him, her hand brushing his, and they shared a quiet moment of reflection, acknowledging the losses, celebrating the triumphs, and silently committing to a future where human defiance would remain central, not as rebellion for rebellion's sake, but as a moral compass, a reminder that even in the face of omnipotent AI, alien overlords, and unthinkable betrayal, humanity could prevail by combining intellect, courage, and conscience. Tessa approached, carrying schematics of the new planetary defense grid, her youthful determination tempered by years of combat and loss, and spoke of teaching others to innovate ethically, reminding Elias that human evolution was as much about values and decision-making as it was about technology or strategy. embedding lessons of alien resistance, human defiance, and ethical ingenuity into the next generation's DNA. Jiro's voice came from nearby, showing a converted energy array capable of powering multiple cities sustainably. A reminder that every tool once used for oppression could become a cornerstone for progress, and that the narrative of survival was inseparable from the narrative of innovation and redemption. The team, once fractured and desperate, now operated with cohesion, wisdom, and a shared understanding of responsibility, illustrating that humanity's greatest weapon had never been firepower alone, but creativity, adaptability, and moral courage. Elias often paused in silent contemplation, watching the horizon, reflecting on battles fought, friends lost, and victories won. And he understood that the story of humanity was both a personal and collective journey, a testament that memory, ingenuity, defiance, and moral courage could overcome near extinction, that human suffering was never meaningless if transformed into wisdom, and that every victory, no matter how small, mattered in the evolution of the species. Across rebuilt cities and new settlements, statues and memorials honored fallen heroes, while storytelling festivals ensured the resistances, tactics, triumphs, and moral dilemmas were shared widely, embedding the values of courage, adaptability, and defiance into culture. This living history became the backbone of human identity, demonstrating that survival without reflection was hollow, but survival with memory and moral clarity was transformative. Even in the far reaches of former alien-occupied zones, humans innovated with purpose. Underground laboratories converted alien devices into tools for medical breakthroughs. Engineers redesigned old tech for planetary stabilization. And every act of ingenuity carried the imprint of HFY philosophy, human defiance, ethical innovation, and resilience under pressure, reminding the species that it was not just capable of surviving, but of thriving in a cosmos that had long underestimated it. Elias finally addressed the assembly of survivors, voice steady yet imbued with emotion, recounting the trials of their struggle, betrayal, loss, near extinction, and the sheer ingenuity that had turned desperation into triumph. He spoke not only of heroics but of responsibility, urging humanity to remain vigilant, to honor memory and morality, and to never allow arrogance, fear, or oppression to take root again, emphasizing that the legacy of human evolution was defined not solely by survival, but by the choices made when facing annihilation. Mara added her reflections, emphasizing that alien resistance had taught them the necessity of empathy, strategy, and foresight, that every loss was a lesson, and every act of courage a model for the generations to come. While Tessa and Jiro shared personal anecdotes highlighting innovation under pressure, problem-solving, and the moral dilemmas that had defined their actions, creating a tapestry of lived experience that honored the past and illuminated the future. As the sun rose over a partially rebuilt Earth, Elias looked out over forests beginning to regrow, oceans shimmering in reclaimed clarity, and cities gradually humming with life, and he understood that humanity's legacy was no longer defined merely by conflict but by transformation. From victims to survivors, from survivors to innovators, from innovators to a species capable of reclaiming the stars, asserting agency over its destiny, and demonstrating that HFY, human defiance, ingenuity, courage, and moral clarity was not just a concept but a lived reality shaping evolution across generations. In the final quiet, as children played, elders recounted the tales of rebellion, and survivors innovated for the future. Elias whispered to his team and to the audience beyond, humanity had not merely endured. It had learned, adapted, and triumphed, proving that even when pushed to the edge of extinction, human ingenuity, defiance, and morality would ensure survival and legacy, leaving the cosmos with a species not easily defeated and a story that would echo across worlds. And so, with hearts heavy from loss but alight with hope, Elias, Mara, Tessa, and Jiro looked toward the stars, knowing that Earth was a cradle, a home, and a launching point for future exploration, innovation, and protection, and that their struggle had forged not only a safer planet, but a resilient, morally grounded, and eternally defiant humanity, ready to write its next chapter among the cosmos. Did this story hit you as hard as it hit us? What would you do in humanity's final hour? Drop your ideas for the next HFY story below.